Chapter 7. 20-pack. Marcus moved to L.A. and found a place in Burbank through a friend of a friend. It was a room in a house shared by a bunch of people who didn't know each other very well. The room smelled funny because one entire wall was covered in corkboard. Marcus set up his colognes on the dresser in a neat row. He went and bought a full-length mirror and an ironing board, which he set up with no intention of ever putting away. Marcus liked to look sharp. He ironed all his clothes before hanging them up, even though he knew he'd iron them again before he wore them. Then he turned his attention to the corkboard. At first he was planning to tear it down, but then he got a better idea. Evenly spaced at eye level, he pinned sheets of paper on the wall, nodding as he did it. He labeled the papers career, money, social, artistic soul. Under career, he listed visit open mic nights, new material for set, eat healthy, haircut once per week. Money was simple. Call temp agencies and find work. Artistic soul, artist date once per week, museum, art exhibit, concert, etc. Social, he stared at the blank page for a while. He didn't really know anyone yet. His housemates seemed odd. Social. There was one thing. Marcus had actually been calling his ex-girlfriend a lot, and she had a friend in L.A. named Maya, who was an actress. His ex had suggested they meet up. Maya? He wrote. They met up at the Pinocchio Diner, which was really a bar. One of his housemates mentioned it, and knowing a place was a good move, so he threw it out there casually. He got there right on time, figuring she'd be late, but she was actually already there. Marcus? She approached. She was tiny and had frizzy hair, kind of a sunken chin. Character actress, he thought to himself. The place was dark and old school, smoky but in a cool way. They sat at a big corner booth that seemed to suck them both into their own world. It was practically soundproof. They made surface conversation. She just had a callback for an MTV commercial that she had a good feeling about. She had a slight Midwestern twang, but with a sarcastic streak that felt very East Coast. She asked about his material. He told her he had 16 minutes and was trying to get it down to 7. He handed her the folder of printed paper. He didn't have high hopes that she'd have good feedback. Most people didn't know how to read comedy. But it was a good excuse to meet up, and she was cool. So why not meet again to get her feedback? They split the bill. As they slid out of the booth, she gave him her headshot and resume. You don't need to waste that on me. I don't know anyone, he said. She raised an eyebrow and gave him a look. Honey, you always take the headshot in L.A. The office was like something out of the 50s. The main room was filled with massive wooden desks and people chattering away on phones, mostly saying, "Can you please hold?" and "I'm sorry, can I take a message?" It smelled like pine sol. The people there were a complete trip. Half of them were dinosaurs. They wore outdated suits or blouses and wool business skirts. The other half looked like college kids going to a formal dance, mismatched ties and worn-out dress shoes. The receptionist led him to one of the office doors and knocked tentatively. "Ms. Ott, I'm sorry to disturb you. This is Marcus from the temp agency." Ms. Ott had huge, white, immobile hair and bloodshot eyes. Ms. Bloodshot, thought Marcus. The joke practically wrote itself. Everyone seemed scared of Ms. Ott, but Marcus kind of liked her. He was good with cranky people. He smiled when she warned him not to waste printer paper, and then she was delighted when he printed out an internal memo on the back of paper from the recycling bin. "Finally, they send me someone with some sense," she croaked. As he drove home that evening, he imagined Ms. Ott calling the temp office and offering him a full-time job. He certainly didn't ever plan to work in real estate, but if he was temping anyways, why not make it permanent and maybe make some better money? She seemed to like him. Why not? He met Maya again the next week at the Pinocchio. She wore overalls and looked cute in a boyish way. They sat in one of the deep alcove booths. She'd gotten the commercial for MTV and told him about it. He told her about his job in the real estate office and had her crying as he did a mini bit imitating Ms. Bloodshot. Then they got into Maya's feedback on his materials. Marcus could tell she had never done stand-up or written for it, but still she had a few decent notes. Someone at the table near them was smoking clove cigarettes. Maya smiled. I love the taste of those. Yummy. Hearing that made Marcus sad. Smoking was a non-starter for him. The next month, reality started to set in. He was blowing through his bank account faster than he'd anticipated. He stopped going to open mic nights and any artist dates to save gas. He'd come home from work and sit in the living room watching MTV. His housemates would come and go or sometimes sit and watch. They'd talk sometimes, or sometimes he'd pretend to be asleep when he heard them coming. The temp job was fine. Ms. Bloodshot would bark at Marcus over how he handled messages and then slam her door and smoke in her office. He got home one night and took off his work clothes. He hadn't even ironed them this morning. He put on a grubby t-shirt and looked at himself in the mirror. He turned to his neatly aligned papers on the corkboard wall. With part of him barely believing it was really happening, he watched his hand reach out and tear down the papers. And then a smile crept over his face as he reached for the last paper left on the corkboard. Maya. He grabbed his notebook and a pen. Dinner was fun, the most fun he'd had in weeks. He dressed up extra nice and left a big tip. He was charming and just the right level of funny. As they headed to the parking garage, Marcus pulled the envelope out of his back pocket. What's that? Maya asked. It's a letter, he said. It's a letter to you. Then right in front of her eyes, he dropped it into the mailbox they were passing. To me? What? What a move he'd pulled. He'd written her a gorgeous letter. In it, he'd told her how unconventionally beautiful he'd found her. He told her how much he loved her comments on his comedy. He'd told her how it took him a while to see it, but now he saw her for the star she was. And he timed it just right. He dropped the envelope in so casually, right where he'd known it was, and now that he'd done it, there was no going back. I think I'm falling in love with you, he said. She made a face somewhere between a frown and a nod. Then she said some words back to him, but the words were secondary. He knew as soon as she made that face that she wasn't into it. The next day was Friday, and he was usually in an okay mood on Fridays, but he just felt tired and a little numb. He felt weird. Marcus! Bloodshot was at his desk. He hadn't seen her coming. She had a box of office envelopes. I count these, she said, leaning her face right into his. He could smell her smoker breath. He felt physically scared of her for a moment, like she was some bird of prey about to lunge. You took an envelope. That is stealing. You're a thief. What? He stammered, feeling his face flush. I'm calling your temp agency and telling them they sent me a thief, and I have no intention of paying them to have my things stolen. Marcus had a trick he used when he was really low. He'd go to McDonald's and get an entire 20-pack of chicken McNuggets. It always put him in a good mood. He got on the freeway, went until he saw a McDonald's sign, and pulled off at the exit. He didn't even go in. He ordered at the drive-thru and parked the car at the end of the lot. God, he loved chicken McNuggets. The texture of the coating and the salty meat. He lined up all three sauces, barbecue, honey mustard, spicy mustard, and alternated bites. He never knew which sauce was his favorite. They were all his favorite. He ate them in a trance of flavor. And then he made a choice. He stopped at 19 McNuggets. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, but it was somehow symbolic. He'd have 19. That felt right. He was going to be okay. He started the car. Soon he was on the freeway, but he wasn't even sure which way he was supposed to go, not back to the real estate office. His brain seemed not to be working. The car just moved along with the rest of traffic. Right up ahead was an overpass he was about to reach. It would just be a matter of inches. Just the slightest movement of his wrist and off he'd go. How random. How small. The idea seemed to enter his thoughts from outside. The reality of it was this sudden curiosity. It almost didn't seem real. He glided over and past the overpass. And suddenly he could barely breathe. It felt like everything was floating. His scalp prickled with cold sweat. The road and cars all seemed to be bending up and over him like the freeway had become a glass bowl with him at the bottom. He couldn't tell where to aim the car, and the wheels seemed to be sliding out of his hands. He shook his head to try and snap out of it. The car was sliding to the right, horns and screeching brakes. He just barely got hold of the wheel as the car slid off the median into the sand and grass. He didn't even remember hitting the brakes, but he'd somehow gotten the car to slide and bump and finally stop. The inside of the car was a disaster. Everything had been thrown everywhere. His bag, an umbrella, map books. He put his head back, panting. He was drenched in sweat. A brownish red smear was splattered across the windshield from a packet of barbecue sauce. Then he noticed it. A small tan oval on the floor of the passenger side. He stared at it for a good 30 seconds before he realized what it was. He put the car in park, turned off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt. Then he leaned over and plucked the McNugget off the rubber mat.